So moved.
Moved by Gibson, support by Parker. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Well, that summed it up pretty well, Madam Chair. It's time for us to file our annual application for state and federal assistance grant funding for the fiscal year 2021. And so what we're requesting is from the federal government, $281,693. We're requesting state funding of $575,775. And that revenue with the local revenue estimated to be $718,661 will provide a balanced budget for 2021. We're also, now this is for operations and capital, and on the capital side of it, to us at the transit, of course, that means buses. And these buses are provided at no additional cost or, to our Berry County taxpayers. The buses are ostensibly anyway replaced when they are eligible for replacement because of their age or miles, and we will have a minimum of 8 buses that will be eligible for replacement in 2021. Most of them are right now, as a matter of fact. So we're asking for a capital grant for $867,000 to replace those buses as well. So if it would be your desire, we'd like to file that application.
I have a question.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. And we here on the county board really focus on being good stewards with county dollars. Yes. But in your department, you have to be good stewards with county, state, and federal dollars. Can you just briefly explain what these grant dollars are used for and how they benefit the public?
Sure. The grant dollars are in the form of, well, two things. One, the capital side of it for the buses. That's strictly reimbursement, not reimbursement, excuse me, that's strictly funding for buses that have expired. And that is a combination of state and federal money. So that I always like to try to emphasize, I guess we all pay federal taxes, right? But that doesn't have anything to do with our tax levies here locally. So those are paid for outside of that. The other funding that we request is for operations. And that comes back to us in the form of reimbursement for eligible expenses. And as you can imagine, just about all of our operating expenses are eligible. And so annually, the state, federal government determine the reimbursement percentage. So generally, the federal government reimburses 18% of our eligible expenses. And the state is anywhere from 35 to 38%. So coming together, we receive, Berry County taxpayers receive more than 50 cents on the dollar back from the government. So we like to mention that as well, because we do appreciate those tax levies that we get from the winter taxes, and we need that upfront to begin our operations, but a lot of that does come back to Berry County.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Voigt? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-4, resolution of intent to apply for state and federal operating and capital assistance for the 2021 fiscal year and appoint William Voigt as the Transportation Coordinator, authorized to provide such information as deemed necessary by the State Transportation Committee or Department for its administration of Act 51, and sign and execute all agreements and documents. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? The item is approved. Here to present our next agenda item is Jane Trejo from Bethany Christian Services. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion for approval of the attached letter of consent for Bethany Christian Services to resettled unaccompanied refugee minors with licensed foster families in Berry County, and authorize the chairperson to sign it.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Moved by Geiger, support by Parker. Ms. Trejo, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you all about this important issue. And I also want to start by thanking the gentleman who shared earlier. I appreciate people's concerns and the concern about the timeliness of this. We are concerned about that as well. So Bethany Christian Services has been in the work of helping vulnerable families and children for over 75 years. Most of you are probably familiar with us in our work with domestic foster care and adoption, but we've also been involved in caring for refugee families and children for about 4 decades. So the issue that we're be talking about today has to do with our refugee work. We can go to my slides. Hopefully this will help you follow along. We're committed to helping children and families find places where they're loved, connected, and safe. And so this is particularly important for our refugees that we serve. You can go to the next slide. At the end of September, the President issued an Executive Order 13888. It's entitled Enhancing State and Local Involvement in Refugee Resettlement. From what we understand, the purpose of this executive order is to allow state and local governments to participate, be involved, cooperate with the successful integration of refugees in American life and the labor force. We already do work a lot with the state officials. We have meetings with our state coordinator, Ben Kavanaugh. We work with the public schools. We work with county health departments. So we do a lot of cooperative work with Health and Human Services as well already, but this allows us to come before you and allow you to be involved in this work as well. So they've specified that local governments means the chief executive officer of the local government, being county or county equivalent. Part of the reason there's been a little bit of a delay in communicating this is that initially we thought that was cities and townships. So we've been reaching out over the last 3 months to a lot of people, but it was clarified not too long ago. This means counties, that we have to have county approval in order to continue this important work. And the consent needs to be in the form of a letter. We've been given instructions that it needs to be unconditional consent in the form of a letter addressed to the Secretary of State, and you all have a template for that letter. So I want to give a little bit of background because I know there's so many questions, and I've tried to select some slides that will be helpful for you to understand this work. So I want to go back because right now, as the gentleman mentioned this morning, it's kind of a hot topic right now, and I think there's a lot of confusion about who refugees are. That when we're speaking of a refugee and concerning the executive order, we are talking about a very specific population. So there's a legal international definition of who a refugee is, and it's not someone who just on their own will goes to another country and wants to live there because of they want a better job or because of economic means. There's a very specific definition, and that definition has been established by the United Nations. A refugee is someone who has fled their country of origin and is unable or unwilling to return due to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So what's key here is that they fled their country of origin and there's a well-founded fear. So it has to be established that they cannot go back to their country. And the reasons are because they are being persecuted for the reasons listed in the definition. So once it has been established that someone cannot return to their home country, they register with the UN as a refugee, and there they wait for basically their options. It doesn't mean they necessarily are able to come to the United States at that point. So I'm going to explain a little bit more what that process entails. If you go to the next slide, just to give some perspective in the world right now, we're dealing with a very large humanitarian crisis. Globally, there are over 70 million people who have been displaced from their homes. That's more than the population of France. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are considered refugees. They haven't all been registered as refugees. And you can see from the slide that 25.9 million, almost 26 million, are registered as refugees. They've been forced to leave. They cannot return. And I want to especially differentiate here the difference between refugee and asylum seekers. So this executive order is only pertaining to refugees. They come through a specific refugee program. We do have, there are asylum seekers. As you know, at the southern border, people coming across seeking refuge, but they are not refugees by an international definition. And they are not part of this executive order. So when we're talking about the people we're helping, we're not speaking of those who are seeking asylum at the southern border. So that's confusing for a lot of people, so I wanted to make sure that was clear. A lot of the issues, the next slide, that are causing this global humanitarian crisis, war, generalized violence, persecution, the people that we have the privilege of serving right here in West and Southwest Michigan are often the victims of war. There have been different political parties, there have been different races, there have been different tribes who've been fighting for years and years, and the people that we serve are innocent victims of this. And they've had to flee for their lives. Sometimes they've been waiting in refugee camps for decades, years and decades, to find a place of safety. So obviously we know there's a lot going on in the world right now, and our refugee program, we feel that we want to do our part, whatever that is, in the United States to help in this global crisis. I think it's important also to understand that some of the demographics on the next slide, that over 50% of refugees are children. So some of these children are still with their families, some are alone and don't have any family to care for them. So that's part of Bethany's mission, is to help vulnerable children, domestically and globally. So we get a chance to help some of these children right here in Michigan. So I think probably what you want to know more of then is, how do refugees get from the UN as internationally in a refugee camp to the United States, and specifically to Michigan? And so I want to talk about the resettlement process. So the resettlement program that has been established in the United States is a federal program, and it's been in place since 1980. So over the past 4 decades, the U.S. has been a leader in welcoming, and this has been the primary reason for this program is humanitarian. That the U.S., as a Statue of Liberty, as you mentioned, we are a place of refuge, and we want to continue being that. But in a way that we're able to. So we respect that we have a country that has to make decisions. So I hope you'll be encouraged by seeing the process that the refugees go through. So on the next slide, I give a little overview of what this process looks like. So the refugee is persecuted, they flee their country of origin, they cross the border, and they find refuge in a second country. And this, in the second country, this is where they register with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And if their fear is well-founded and determined to be valid, then they register as refugees with the UN. But this doesn't mean they get to suddenly go to another country, a third country. And they have three options at this point. They can wait and see if they can go back to their country to be repatriated, or some of them might be able to integrate into that second country. And the third option is resettlement in a country like the United States. There are over 30 countries around the world who bring in refugees, and each country has their own screening process, their own determination of how many they'll receive, just like the US. So total, less than 1%, I think it's about 0.6% of that 26 million actually resettle in a third country. So it's really very small, the number that actually come in and resettle in a third country like the United States. So how it looks, the next slide, the whole process. Again, there's a fleeing of the country of origin, living in a second country. Sometimes refugees live in the second country for 2 decades. We have families here who've been in the Congo, and there's been 2 years of war, and they've raised their family waiting in the Congo or waiting in Rwanda to find a place where they can call home. If they then are referred to resettlement, which is less than 1%, they can potentially start the process to apply to come to the United States. And it's all determined by the U.S. government. We don't have a say in this process. This is the State Department that has determined this process. So they go through a series of interviews with the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services. They go through multiple security screenings, health screenings, and if they pass all of that, that takes about 1.5 years or more. So the minimum 18 months, this process, then they are accepted and assigned to a resettlement agency to come to the U.S. I need to say that the refugees are the most vetted travelers to the U.S. of anyone, more than a student, a business person, a tourist. They go through more than anyone who wants to come here. So once they get here, they're thankful. And we have the assurance knowing that they've been processed and they've been screened, and we are getting people who we know that will be safe and who want to make a good life here and want to contribute to our communities. If you look at the next slide, just an overview of some of the security screenings, and I don't even know what all of these agencies are, but these are the agencies that the refugees go through in terms of their screenings. And especially probably right now, people are nervous about terrorism, so they do go through all our terrorism lists, watch lists, National Counterterrorism Center, Terrorism Screening Center, Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Patrol, and on through, and plus at the bottom, interagency checks. And these are done multiple times, every step of the process during these 18 months. So we feel confident that if the U.S. government has said they're cleared, they're safe, they can come in, that we can welcome them here. And we have seen, I would love to be able to give a lot of more personal stories and anecdotes of, I know refugees personally, and they've done so well, and they're so grateful to be here, and they love this country, and they love the freedom they have here, and they do contribute, they really do contribute to our communities. How it works, a little bit more of the details. There are 9, the next slide, 9 resettlement agencies that work directly with the State Department. 6 of those 9 are faith-based. And of course at Bethany, we are motivated by our faith as well as we do this work. That is central to what we do. And we work with these. So the State Department decides how many of these agencies, how many they can resettle, what their funding is, and then we are an affiliate, and we work with these agencies as we bring them to this area. If you look at the next slide, just to give you an overview of what it's looked like over the last 40 years. Like I said, the program started in 1980, and we've been, this program has had bipartisan support for 40 years. We've had, across the board, people have really believed in this program and believe that the U.S. is doing a great work. And you can see how the numbers of admissions have gone up and down. That's because it's actually a presidential executive power to decide how many can come in each fiscal year. So the president consults with Congress every fall and then determines, starting October 1st, the fiscal year, how many refugees will come in the next year. So we don't determine how many are coming in. The president determines, and the State Department determines the whole security screening. So on the next slide, you can see all the numbers that they've gone up and down for a variety of reasons. But in the last couple years, so in fiscal year 2019, we resettled countrywide 30,000 refugees total. And the presidential determination for 2020, starting October 1st of last year, is 18,000. So the number, it is the lowest in history. So if anyone's fearing an influx of refugees, that's not going to happen. We hope we will see families and youth come into our programs, but the numbers are quite low, so we probably won't be seeing the numbers that we're used to seeing right now. Of that 18,000, it is broken down into different categories, so ultimately it'll probably be even less than that we'll see right here. So Michigan has been in the top 10 to 15 of states that have brought refugees in. We have a very strong community support. The state, our local churches, we have so many churches who partner with us, businesses who want the labor force. And so we feel really privileged to be able to help these families come in, and we do believe it actually helps the communities. We've seen positive things come from the communities where these refugees have resettled. So in terms of Barry County, we actually have not resettled any families in Barry County. So what we are coming to you for is because we have a foster family. They're sitting right over here on the side, right here. It's Kim and Tang Nguyen, and they are licensed, and their licensor, Geraldine, is right in the middle. Has worked with them to become a licensed foster care family. So youth who are in refugee camps or overseas who don't have family with them, they come as unaccompanied refugee minors. And you can skip ahead. Yeah, you got the slide up. Thank you. These are children who've gone through the exact same vetting process as the adults. All the security screenings, all the interviews, all the medical checks, everything. They've waited. And the UN is very careful that if they don't have a parent or other responsible adult to care for them, that they attempt reunification. They search to find where is a family member who they could be reunited with. So by the time they come to us, they don't have anyone or anywhere to go. And so along with Bethany's mission to care for these vulnerable children, we have licensed foster families who are licensed in the state of Michigan to take in these children. And these children are they're at risk for exploitation more than any in the world. And so we really want to continue this work. We want to be able to place some of these children with a family who's willing to take them in right here in Barry County. I had also just talked about family reunification, just to let you know that the other families who will be coming into Michigan, not necessarily Barry County, but like Grand Rapids area, Kalamazoo area, all of those really are family reunification cases. So if they're families who are already here and say they have an adult sibling who is alone in a refugee camp, we will want to try to have them come here and join their family. So we don't see any families just randomly wanting to come and live in Barry County. Most of them have family in Grand Rapids or in Kalamazoo or in Holland. And they'll want to join their families. So if we do have the privilege of serving some in this next fiscal year, that's probably where they'll be going. But here in Berry County, we're looking forward to hopefully seeing some youth come and live with the family. They go to school, they get support, they thrive, they do well, but we really believe they need a loving home. So in order to do this, because of the executive order, we are required, and we want to comply with this executive order, to get your consent to continue doing this life-saving work. And that is in the form of a letter. I know you've mentioned that it's a conditional letter with URM. I would ask, we appreciate any support you have to give, obviously. I would ask that if you would consider possibly having a general consent. The instructions we've been given is that we are not supposed to place any conditions on the letter. We don't know if the letter is submitted, how it will be received by the Department of State. They haven't given any kind of indication that we can do this, have that kind of consent. So we would ask, given that we will not be placing any families or adults in the county, and that the unaccompanied refugee minors are in the resettlement program, the same as the adults, that we would ask you to consider a letter that doesn't have the condition for unaccompanied refugee minor. But if that is what you decide to do, we're grateful for your support either way.
Any questions for Ms. Trejo?
How many do you think would end up in Berry County?
1 or 2 youth, yeah. 1 or 2 youth, probably.
So I read your agenda request, and so I pulled up this where it said click here, and I clicked here, and I came up with this funding opportunity notice for this reception. So the proposal submission deadline for that is January 21st, 2020. Is that what this letter is for? As I've read through this, you need this letter, although it did say in the document that you should try to obtain these things,
Yeah.
and that they could be submitted after the deadline.
So this is where the deadline's been moving for us. So we've got the State Department, we've got the 9 resettlement agencies, then we have us. And so we're receiving instructions from above. We had initially had Christmas, the 90 days and so we were scrambling to try to get consent by Christmas. But then because of the funding request that all these resettlement agencies submit to the State Department, their deadline is the 21st. But that's the ultimate deadline. So they are wanting to be able to process all the letters, to get everything organized, to get everything, because they have to do a whole proposal. And so they're asking us to get them by the 10th. But yes, the ultimate deadline for those resettlement agencies is the 21st for submission.
And also in this, there's language that you've done outreach to the local people in this community on their feelings, and you've gotten data. Is that happened here in Berry County?
Well, this is fairly new for us for Berry County. We've worked a lot with the counties that primarily we've kind of had to start with Kent County, Calhoun County, Kalamazoo County. That's where we've done the bulk of our resettlement. And then we went to look at where there's refugee foster families. And so that's been a little bit harder. We've reached out as much as we can. Sometimes it's taken a while to get response from a lot. So we haven't had a lot of time to do as much as we would love to do. We'd love to be able to do a lot more presentation. We weren't certain, actually, for a while, if the unaccompanied refugee minors would be included in this executive order. So that needed to be clarified, and they are. So it took us a while to catch up, honestly, with the details of this, but I believe we reached out at the beginning of December to all the counties that we knew we needed to reach out to.
Okay, because like I said, I did see some things that are required in here. Accountability to affected populations is one of the documents that's required to go with the grant application, which I understand is someone above you who's submitting that.
Yes.
But, so I just wondered about that document that would say what the effect is to the population in Berry County. what had been gathered.
That I'm not familiar with, given that that's, it would be one of the resettlement agencies. They've just instructed us at least to get this letter of consent to be our part in contributing to this. So they will actually write all of that and compile all of that, and we are not involved in that process.
And I'm sorry, what did you, the foster family's name again?
Yes.
What's their names?
Kim and Tang
Oh, okay,
Nguyen.
Nguyen.
And they actually have a letter. Yes, if you want, actually, if you would like to hear from them, I don't know if you have time, Kim they've written a letter.
If
up
you
to
would
you.
like to come and read your letter or parts of your letter, you are more than welcome to.
Do you want me to stay here?
Oh, okay. And are they registered through the Department of Health and Human Services here in Berry County?
Yep, you're licensed with the state of Michigan
Yes.
as a foster family.
Through DHHS? I know that Berry County was having trouble a few years ago getting foster families.
The license that we have covers both domestic and refugee children, so it took a while. But maybe Gigi could speak to that a little bit better. But yes, we do have our license.
I see. She talk more about the licensing. Gigi has been the one who's been working with.
We could have you speak into the microphone.
Yes. Could you please repeat your question?
I said a few years ago, Berry County was having trouble getting enough foster families to serve the needs of Berry County. So I just wondered how many foster families, and have we met the need and have the amount that we're allocated for the county?
Got it. So only, though, what I am aware of through the state and the department that I work with is we do have one foster family for our refugee-specific, domestic-wise, because I only focus on our refugee families. I am not aware, but I know at least with refugees in our surrounding counties, we have over 30 families that are licensed to take in refugees, and at least, I would say about 2/3 have refugees in their homes.
Okay, so this family is, because of they take domestic, or non-domestic individuals, so it doesn't really affect the people that are licensed through our DHHS office, is that what you're saying? That's what I hear you saying.
Correct. In order to take a refugee, they would have to go through more training, a bit more requirements.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would not be taking away from children in Berry County who needed a foster family?
Correct.
Okay. One of the questions that I had. So,
Sheriff Lee, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there any way we get a heads up on for us, 911, the schools? I kind of feel bad for the schools, I just kind of picture them scrambling around trying to find interpreters and all that stuff. Do we get a heads up?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Geiger?
The first one is for Jan. In our world of social media and 24-hour news, I think definitions get a little confused. Can you just reiterate what the difference between a refugee and undocumented or illegal immigrant is?
Yes. So that's a very important question, and I'm grateful that you've asked for a clarification again. So someone who is registered as a refugee and comes through our federal refugee admissions program, they have gone through all the security screenings, all the immigration process, everything they need to come here with all documents, so that when they come, they've come through the federal government, they've come through our U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, and they come with documents and are eligible then to work, to go to school, to eventually become permanent residents and citizens. So that's very different than someone who comes into the country without any documents, and then they seek asylum, and then they begin the process, or they hope to begin the process of finding asylum after arriving. So all of the refugees that we see, they've already gone through everything and have been cleared before coming. Is that clear?
Thank you. And my last question is, how did you and your organization come to find these fine people to be foster parents?
Then I will defer to them.
We found them. That's a real short answer, but for personal reasons, which is a little bit stated in our letter, we sought out how we could help.
Oh.
So,
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Smoker?
How long was the letter good for? Is it just good for this grant cycle, or is this infinity?
You can hear me. So from our understanding, again, this is new for us, that this likely will have to be renewed every year if it continues to be upheld. So we would be visiting you again next year around the same time, or hopefully earlier, to get another letter of consent. That's our understanding right now, unless something changes.
Commissioner Parker?
When the refugee comes in, now if they have parents that have not got to this area and they find their parents or whatever it might be to connect, do the parents come then? Can the parents come at that time?
That really depends. It depends on where the parents are. If they are in a refugee camp and they've registered as refugees, potentially they can come. We will actually, if they are already referred to come to the U.S. and have begun the process, we will request that they could come. Most often, they've either lost their families, they don't have their families, or they're still in a very dangerous situation, often in their country of origin, in the midst of a crisis or in war, then they aren't able to come. We depend on the immigration process. So it all depends on where they are, what their situation is, and our legal immigration process, whether they can join the children.
Now, it used to be that they could bring in any family, cousins, everything. Now it's just for parents right now that they can bring just parents in.
If they have refugee relatives in a camp already, they are able to try to petition for their parents or their children or spouses. So they've limited it to a very nuclear family. So cousins, they would have to wait till they become citizens, petition for cousins, and that would take years and years, possibly even decades. But if it's an immediate family member and they are a refugee already, registered and in the process of coming to the U.S., we can request that they're coming. But it is still a very difficult process to get family members to come. It has happened, and we would like for that to continue to happen. But yeah.
I called a relative that has been doing this for several years.
I like this ringtone.
Yeah.
Okay, they've been doing it for several years, and they're extremely vetted when they come here, and from what they've been through several of the refugee foster parenting. So they felt that it was being done in a way that would not be detrimental to their county or to our country. So I thought that was gave me a good, because I didn't know. I'm very disappointed that we only had till September 10th to do that. I think that was something that is causing some angst on several people here right now. So, but from what I've been told by my relatives, that and I've met several of them. They came out to the campground with some year after year with them, and they just it's a beautiful thing to see them integrating into our country and making connections and communication with people that love them, and also become friends with many other people too. So, but anyways, that's my take on it.
I have a couple more questions.
So do you think that it would be possible to get with the agency that you're working with to get that project narrative or the accountability study that they've done? And if they, I can't imagine that one's been done in Berry County, but perhaps they did a phone, survey or something here. Anything's possible. But is it possible that you could get those documents? And in a day full of technology, I mean, even if we did this next Tuesday, which is the 14th, I mean, certainly could get it, to them very quickly.
I would be happy to reach out and try. I'll reach out to those agencies that we work with, the national resettlement agencies who are, right now, I'm sure they're working on these proposals, and see what they have. If maybe I can get more details of the exact document you're looking for, because I'm actually not familiar with it and the title of it, and then I can reach out. I'd be happy to do that.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Geiger.
Is there a risk that if approving this request was delayed, these 2 kids wouldn't be placed in Berry County? Is that a real risk?
Yes, this is new for us, so we don't know how strict it's going to be in terms of getting these letters in time and getting them without conditions. So this is all up to the State Department. So once we submit these letters to the resettlement agencies and they will submit them with their funding requests, then it's up to the State Department to decide. So we're living in a little bit of uncertainty, but we're doing our best to get this accomplished. I would hope that if it was done in a week that there wouldn't be an issue with that, because it is before the 21st. But I don't know.
I'm listening. I'm trying to find that in here that said that, that they should be attached with the application, but that, you could submit them after.
Okay. Well,
that's what I'm looking for in here.
what I can do is I can certainly reach out and get more information related to these questions.
Regardless, it's only for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's because we'd be back to this with a choice next year, too.
Yeah. So next year, hopefully, we would have this option a little bit sooner.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. Jane, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. And I think I don't know what the response has been in other places. I think this kind of hit our radar late, as has been. So there's a little shock to the fact of how did this get on our plate at the last minute with a deadline that's a few days away. So there's some real concern there. But you had mentioned that you've been working with the Refugee Resettlement Program for 40 years, 4 decades, I think was your comment.
For Bethany, yep.
Okay.
I haven't been personally, but Bethany has been involved with,
Started when you were 2, so that's great. But for that 40 years, can you give us a little bit of a macro and a micro? For West Michigan, what has that meant for refugees in the resettlement? How many refugee minors have been, resettled in West Michigan? When you look at the areas of Lansing, Grand Rapids, Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, we're right in the middle of all that. What has that been?
So I can't give you all the numbers going way back, but more currently, we do unaccompanied refugee minor foster care in Grand Rapids and in Kalamazoo. Bethany, Samaritas does in Lansing. There aren't any in Battle Creek that I'm aware of. They do adult and family resettlement in Battle Creek. Last year, we took in about 15 refugee youth in Kalamazoo who came into our programs. Most of them actually are living we have group homes. We have independent living group homes for kids. And most of them are living there, and a few in refugee families. In Kalamazoo, we've only been doing refugee work for about 5 or 6 years, so we're fairly new to it. So our numbers are lower. I don't know the unaccompanied refugee minor numbers for Grand Rapids, but total refugees in the last year, they did over 300. They had over 300 individuals come into the Grand Rapids area. Most of them were Congolese, so folks from the Democratic Republic of Congo have typically lived in refugee camps for a couple decades, and they are over 90% Christian when they come from the Congo, and they've developed some wonderful Christian communities in Grand Rapids and in Kalamazoo that they formed some church fellowships. So I can't give you better numbers, but I would say over 300 in Grand Rapids. Of families, we had 13 individuals. 3 families came in last year to Kalamazoo. So we're talking less than 30 individuals have come to Kalamazoo in the last fiscal year.
Less than 30, so for the area, for that area, you're probably saying less than 500 to 700.
Oh, yes. Oh, less for sure.
Bring that down to Berry County. What has Berry County done historically over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years as far as refugee resettlement?
We have done no refugee resettlement in Berry County that I'm aware of in the last number of years.
From yourself or other organizations?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Okay, and it sounds like there are different requirements for foster care for refugee resettlement.
Mm-hmm.
So how many families are currently qualified in Berry County to take on resettled refugees?
One, one right here.
Okay.
This is our family. You live in Delton, is that right? Yeah.
I think I've seen that gal before, so.
Yeah.
But,
And we're very grateful. We're very grateful. So,
Yeah.
so it's new for our work in your county as well.
So you're saying that literally, how many refugee minors could Kim and her family take on?
2. 1 to 2, yeah.
So
They're
right now,
licensed for 2.
okay, so right now we have one family in all of Berry County that's qualified, and they can have a maximum of 2 people. So that's the entire impact on the entire
Yes.
county.
That's what we're looking at,
All right,
yes.
because I think the fear is that if all of a sudden there were 100 kids coming into our school systems that speak different languages from different parts of the country, you create issues for the schools, you create issues, for the sheriff and law enforcement. That just creates a lot of barriers for the county, which we don't feel like we're prepared to deal with at this point. And there's fear of how that works. But if we're saying that this is a 1-year agreement for 2, that's a different story when you really break it down and define it into what it really is
Yeah.
versus the fear of there's going to be buses pulling up. You have 100,000 people, it's just a different scenario. So that, I think it's important to define what we're actually working with. So you're saying right now there's one family.
That's why we're here.
Does it
is
take
for
a
this
lot, does it
family.
take a lot of time to train to get refugee status to be able to take care of refugee minors?
It was a very lengthy process. It's similar to being licensed to do domestic foster care, but with a few additional hours. We go through a home study process where Gigi and a few others have come into the home. They've interviewed all of our children, interviewed us. Our home was evaluated for whether it's appropriate to have children in. Kind of take yourself back to the toddler years when you had little children at home. Do you have all of the safety measures that need to be in place for young children? So it was just a lot of paperwork and attending classes and waiting to be approved.
Okay. Are there many more families available or in the process to take on refugee minors at this point in the county?
Not in this county that I'm aware of. Or
Okay. So it's a pretty low threshold here. Okay, what are the typical ages of the refugees that are being resettled?
the referrals that we've received, and we have received several, are generally 11 to 17 years old. Sometimes it's a sibling group. Sometimes it's a young mother with a baby who needs, she's still a minor, so she needs that family care as well. But generally 11 to 17, unless it's what we have received for referrals. So when I say that we received those referrals, They may have been children that we as a family felt we could not provide the appropriate mental health and care for. We have other children in our home. They may, and more so, have been children who were snatched up by other people while we were in the process of saying yes and contemplating. It's a very quick turnaround for most of the referrals that we've received. Like, we'll get a call and we have to respond within 2 to 3 hours, and we're not that fast. So,
A
because
lot
we
of
have
domestic placements happen that quickly too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
whoever grabs the phone first.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whether it's, somebody CPS is removed from a home or a parental rights termination, sometimes those domestic cases happen really fast too.
Yeah, and we have 6 children in our home, so our desire is to do what we can to serve what we feel is God's purpose for our life, while still being sure that we're meeting the needs of the children that are in our home now. So we have probably received 6 referrals, 1 yesterday. So when you ask, are there children waiting, there is a 14-year-old girl waiting for your decision. So this is our friend Tim Goggins. He does not live in Berry County, but he teaches in Delton Kellogg, which is where I teach as well. So some of your concerns about language barriers and how that will be addressed by the school districts, we're intimately involved in that. And he's also a parent.
I'm at the other end of this. My wife and I took in 2 boys that were refugees from Sudan in 2001. And I worked very closely with Bethany Christian Services for many years, first as a volunteer and then as a foster parent. And I think that people's concerns that somehow these kids don't fit, or that they're a burden on the culture or a burden on the community, is by and large mostly unfounded. My 2 sons now, which I'm still in contact with all the time, both are college graduates, both pay taxes, both contribute to society, both are independent, and most of the Sudanese kids that I worked with, which was, they relocated about 300 in the Grand Rapids area in 2000 to 2002. I knew maybe 150 of them. I taught 20 of them to drive a car. I spent thousands of hours in volunteer work. They are, by and large, almost 100% are high school graduates. Almost, I'd say 40% attended college. All that I know of are gainfully employed, pay taxes, and are contributors to society. Most of which travel back and forth to their home countries. Now that the situation in Sudan is better, they contribute to the economies there by sending money home. This is a net gain for every community. My sons grew up in an area in Cascade where they went to a school that was essentially homogenous in its race, but they fit in fine. They were accepted by the community, and this is a net plus in almost every single way. And the concerns that there somehow is going to be this deluge of people clamoring to be here, it's just not true. The distinctions that they're making between refugees and other type of immigrants is critical in understanding this issue. This is a positive for the entire community.
Tim is the refugee parents. Kim. So I'm a product of a refugee. My parents migrated here in 1986 as Vietnamese after the war. So I lived in Grand Rapids. We had a church that sponsored us in Grand Rapids. We moved around, but we ended up in Grand Rapids again, just that's where we came from. So I I don't teach at the school district. I am their technology site coordinator at Hastings and at Down. So my job is to keep the kids safe from all the technology stuff, and educate them, block the
Good
things
luck.
that they aren't supposed to do.
He's
so sometimes,
responsible
on
for
some
getting rid of
days
their
they
cell
don't really.
phones.
Yeah. No, I'm a product of the refugee program, as basically.
Okay. And Jane, I noticed you had listed 10 counties that had already given consent for this. Are there counties that have refused?
Not yet, they're still in process like you. So we haven't had any refusals.
So you've had no no's at this thing?
I checked this morning, Dave, and they said no county in America had turned down this program.
Okay.
North Dakota, where I'm from, they've all said yes as well, so.
Okay. I think you have answered my questions, because that was the key thing is numbers. And if we're talking about a couple families and a yearly renewal, that I just see so little downside to this at this point. And we certainly appreciate everything you guys are doing. That's great information. Took a while to get everything out where we needed it, but I think I've got my questions answered, so thank you.
Commissioner Smoker.
Thank you very much for being a refugee. You are licensed at this time? You have your license. Is there anything set up in case it don't work out?
If we were to receive a child into our home and it was not a positive experience for them or for us, my understanding is that, well, we have received one placement of a child who needed a different place to be, a child that was struggling pretty significantly. And so there is a backup plan. So I guess that would be the short answer, that yes, there's continued assistance and support should things go awry and that is not positive for them when they come.
Thank you. I guess all of my questions have been answered. I am still grappling with the timing. I don't think if we moved this to the full board, it would hurt you. Just my thoughts.
I did find the statement in here, note that state and local consents are not required for refugee resettlement before the award period. However, applicants may submit such consent letters from state and local officials on a rolling basis, both before and after submission of their proposals. Letters should be submitted, and then it goes on to font and
So if we're a little late in getting it to you,
well, I'm just saying that that's what's
Right.
in the grant.
I don't know what confluence of political and national events brought these folks here, that the final hurdle you have to go through in your adoption process is the Berry County Board of Commissioners. But you seem like a great family, and I think any kids would be lucky to have you. So I'm ready to support this. I'm not going to see any more information between now and Tuesday that would change my mind. However, I do agree with John that we got to figure out a way to get this faster. I'm not so much concerned about this process, but next year.
I can assure you that this got on the agenda as fast as I could get it there. I think I got it after the deadlines for the 17th, and then we didn't have meetings to the rest of the month. And so it was placed on the very first cow that I could possibly get it onto. So it's not that I held it back and had lots of questions. We had some round robin emails to make sure what the intent of the letter was before I decided, before we put it on the agenda. I didn't want it to be, we're bringing you a whole bus full of people from wherever because we don't have any place else to put them when we already have a housing crisis in the county.
Right.
And not knowing much about the thing, we did our due diligence and discussed it at length with her as much as we could before it got on the agenda.
But this time, it's two kids.
It is. Any other comments? Having been through the former Pride training for foster care parents,
There's some long hours.
they are very long hours, many, many weekends given up to sit through those courses, and not following through to become a licensed foster parent at that time. I end up with 2 of my own and felt it was better to not introduce fosters at that time. I totally understand the process you've been through, and I get it. So thank you for opening your lives up to other people's blessings that they didn't recognize. So, any further questions for our group?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
comment, if you're planning to recommend it to the, maybe you're already thinking about this, to the full board, the motion that was made was to approve it. You want to amend that to make it a recommendation to the full board.
Okay.
And also, thank you, Luella. We have crafted the letter more narrowly to define it, and I want to make sure I say this right, only for unaccompanied minor refugee resettlement. Jane has obviously brought up a comment about the department, State Department requesting an open letter. So you'll need to give us some guidance as well with regard to what you'd like us to bring to the full board. The same letter that's been prepared, or if it's a more broad letter.
Commissioners?
So we're talking about the letter that's already written here that for our,
In the
to
packet.
Secretary Pompeo.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
The letter that's in your packet is very narrow scope, just for unaccompanied minors. The letter that Jane provided us was a lot more broad, and that's the part without restriction that she's mentioned. It's just more or less, does your county support the foster care services that are being offered through Bethany, more or less? And Berrien County had done a letter of support with a very narrow scope, with just the unaccompanied minor part listed in there. They had the similar concerns that we had when we first looked at this. Your option today would be to either recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the narrow scoped letter, or amend it to be the template letter that Jane provided for us.
You think it matters?
We're not certain. We've been given instructions that it should be unconditional. They've asked for a letter that does not place any conditions. So of nationality, of race, of anything of that sort. So we actually don't know if they will reject this letter and say no, that's not the consent we're looking for. That's why I say we will not be placing families here. So even the general consent, what we're looking for is to place children in Newman's home. That's what we've been instructed. So that's what, from our knowledge, that it's supposed to be an unconditioned consent letter.
I guess I have 2 questions. One's for you. Do you know if they had any trouble with their letter, Berrien County?
I do not. I just,
Okay.
again, moving along rather quickly as well, and I just happened to come across my listserv as we were preparing the packet, and so we crafted it knowing what was occurring more narrowly, but I do not know if they've acted on that letter at Berrien County and or if it's been submitted even or not.
Okay. The second question I had was,
I can answer that question, though.
what?
On the other counties.
Oh, on Berrien,
Because
okay.
I did research this over the past week, and Macomb County did get into some trouble, but they had the opposite problem. They were too broader than the scope, and they actually stepped on some toes of some other municipalities, right? So my understanding was that you could be too broad and state you had more authority than you actually had. But I had not read anywhere about the opposite, where
This is coming, so we have have another colleague of ours is working with Berrien County and dialoguing with them right now. So it hasn't been submitted yet. I believe their board is meeting on the 9th. The template that I presented to you was drafted by Ben Kavanaugh, who is our Michigan State Refugee Coordinator. And so I'm following his guidelines as the person who knows the most of how it needs to be stated. He drafted the resolution as well as the letter. So that's, I can't give any authoritative
All right.
information outside of what I've been given. And we've been given instructions that the letter should not have any conditions. So.
My second question, can I? Okay, so we have a very wonderful, qualified family here to accept the minors. Do we have anyone in Berry County that is set up to accept a family?
We have been looking for that at this point.
And does that sponsor family have to go through some training? I guess I'm directing that to you, Gigi.
Yes, so,
Okay.
yes, we have, churches usually are our co-sponsors. So we have entire church teams that help, these families come in, they help set up their apartment, they help them with, getting, their, IDs and getting connected with the doctor, and if there's kids enrolled in school, and it's actually a really amazing process.
And do we have anybody here in Berry County?
We don't, right? No, we haven't.
Well, I mean, if we don't have anybody right now that's trained to do that for families, probably we wouldn't be getting a family.
I don't anticipate that, given also the distance from Kalamazoo. If we're getting families, they would probably be right in Kalamazoo, so I don't anticipate.
Well, that was my second question, sorry.
I think the letter, the short letter, and it says, as Chairperson of Berry County Commission, I consent to allow Bethany Christian Services to resettle the unaccompanied refugee. That's up to them then to do it the way that they're supposed to have it done. I don't think it has anything to do with us having to be in special written form. I think that would be enough, I would think. As long as it's putting the responsibility to Bethany.
And I think that pretty clearly states the desire of the board at this point.
The way it's
The narrow-
presented in our package?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we need to be more clear, we can have that discussion at another time. But for now, I think my opinion is we give this family the document they need to make their family, and we discuss, if needed, a broader scope.
So right now, the question before the committee is approval. Do you want to amend that to be recommend to the board?
I do, yes.
Is that a motion?
A second.
Motion by Smelker, second by Connor to change the motion to read, recommend to the Board of Commissioners the attached letter of consent for Bethany Christian Services to resettle unaccompanied refugee minors with licensed foster families in Berry County and to authorize the chair to sign it. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The
Nay.
request is amended. Now, is there any discussion? Seeing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the attached letter of consent for Bethany Christian Services to resettle unaccompanied refugee minors with licensed foster families in Berry County and authorize the chairperson to sign it. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The item is approved. Thank you, ma'am. We will have a letter for you next week. Let's take a break. We've been here a while.